Muse Jam Session Recording 145. This is Dani Beaumont, and I'm a Principal Product Manager on the Adobe Muse team. Today I'm joined by Laurel D'Angelo. She covers marketing for Adobe Muse. Also, we've got some folks that are pretty solid Muse designers and developers that build out templates and widgets. I see Ali Pordelli from Cookie.com. I see Chris Kellett from 123 Muse, which is an online magazine, formerly with Muse Grid. Hi, folks. Thanks for joining. Ali knows it. Chris knows it. I am going to cover over what I know about SEO. I definitely know the extent to which I've been told. You can put hooks into the Muse application. From there, Ali and I were just talking yesterday about hiring consultants to optimize your search engine results. It's kind of a black magic, and happy to open up the floor or allow folks to chat with each other about tips and tricks that we've learned there that are less expensive than hiring a pro to come in and do it for you. So let's go ahead and get started. I am going to, let's see, I'm going to share up my screen. As I do so, before it disappears from my screen, let me just mention in that upper left-hand corner, there's a Resources tab. I am going to be working from the SEO Notes tab. Also, the Beginner's Guide to SEO is a terrific way to work there. I'll also have open my Webmaster Tools and Sitemap. Google, well, I guess this is Google Sitemap Help is what I have linked, but Webmaster Tools and Google Analytics are kind of all of the resources that I'll be using today as we proceed, depending on whether or not I've just locked myself out of Connect and the chat again. So let me resolve that once and for all before we get too far. Bear with me just 1 second. All right, I'll be right back. Sorry, folks. Okay, audio should be back up. Connect has this wonderful feature. If you hit the wrong button, you're just lost. So I won't hit it again, I promise. Let me begin to share my screen. And we will get started. Okay, so a nice place to start that I really enjoyed when I was trying to explore SEO. So I probably knew nothing about SEO, started working on the Muse project and wanted to understand how our engineers are engineering the application in a way that works well, and how I can apply SEO to some of the sites that I work on. So this Moz Beginner's Guide, I'm a visual person. I really like visual, and sorry, I'm just seeing a question about the links. There's a resources pod in the upper left-hand corner. If you're in full screen mode, you'll probably just see what I'm presenting. But if you toggle the full screen to be smaller, you'll see the links in chat and such. So it should be in the upper left-hand corner there for you. The Beginner's Guide to SEO I really liked because it's very clear, it's very graphical, and it's definitely designed for someone that's new to SEO. And there's some nice steps that you can talk through as you go through your site and compare what you've done to optimize SEO. So Chris Kellett's also put some links in the chat as well, but this one's a terrific place to get started. So let's go ahead and actually switch to my notes. I asked the Muse engineering team what they had on their list for things to focus on around SEO with the application. And we can run through that list. First thing they said is that the more places, of course, that the web links to you. If there are links on other websites that link to your site, that's terrific. So the more appropriate places that you can link your site from and point to your site is good. Another one, internal and external links pointing to pages. We'll talk about this. Sometimes I've heard that just links within the site, like having a really heavy footer with all of the links to all of your pages sort of enumerated on that footer helps. Again, that can be a point of debate. Happy to have dialogue today and have people tell me what they think about some of these things. There's no necessarily one right way when it comes to SEO, and the other is that search engines, their goal is to find the answer to the question you're asking. And let's say the answer to the question is, where is the best bakery in Noe Valley in San Francisco? I can try to manipulate Katie's Cafe so that I come to the top of that search rank when someone searches for that. But the nature of search engines is to give good answers to the people that are looking, not necessarily sell your company or sell your product more aggressively. So it's kind of a constantly moving target that is always good to sort of check in on what seems to be true with those search engines over time. Let's go ahead and swing over. I'm going to use a different site. I think Katie's Cafe and I are bored with one another. I'm working on a new design. But the problem with Katie's is it's really just a demo site. There really is not real content that gets updated and traffic. So I'm going to pick on a site that I use. It's not the most beautiful site, but it does the job. And it's for a rowing team that my son is on. And I like it because there are real users, real people, and we have real content that we add to the site on a weekly basis. I have some Google search engine tracking going on there, but we'll jump between some of the different websites that I have and show how that tracking works in just a bit. But if I were going to kind of look around and see what I've done in this site, the first place that you want to think about is how you're naming your pages and how that structure is in place. So if I swing back to my list, let's see. So they talk about page file names that match search terms. So if it's going to be a rowing club, let's say, calling it Pacific Rowing Club or mentioning events for Pacific Rowing Club in the titles of the pages is important. So if you'll notice, I've got some simple titles to these pages. I've got a home page, programs, registration, events, pretty simple and descriptive. If I click in here to the main master and right mouse on it to go to page properties, what you'll notice is I have the ability to prepend and postpend. They call it prepend in India. I tried to get them out of the habit, but I think I've picked it up. So a prefix and suffix, I think, is another way to refer to it for text that appears before and after the name of the page. So you'll notice I've got programs here. What happens in the web is it'll say programs, and then I've got this heavy separator bar, and then PRC. So I could spell out Pacific Rowing Club if I wanted, but the reality is when you go to that site, you're going to be limited by the size of that tab. So if I go to pacificrowingclub.org here, and if I come through, and I'm just going to command click and bring up a number of different pages here. And notice as my browser gets crowded, I may end up with some truncation to the tabs, depending on how smushed it gets. Try to do some smushing here. So I'm making sure to have the name of the page to the left so that if I do get that truncation, notice some of the longer names here are starting to be trimmed. I can see what's relevant. It's one of the things, you know, the Muse team drives us crazy is when people don't really name their pages at all. I could probably call this Pacific Rowing Club on the home page just so that you know where you've landed, and you'd see that if that's the first page and only page you have open. So it's kind of a nice tip from me there to spell out Pacific Rowing Club. It doesn't necessarily have to be home. So let's go ahead and play here for a moment. What I would do, because I don't want to repeat PRC twice, let's call this Pacific Rowing Club. And then what I want to do is try to make it an exception, and I may be making a fool of myself in doing that. Notice how I have these masters set up. I've got an A main master on my landing page here, and then everything else is using a sidebar master throughout the site. I also have the news master, which is inheriting the sidebar master. So if you're not familiar with multiple masters, there's an inheritance structure there. So this master, C News, is using sidebar. Sidebar is using main. But I can be tricky about that now if I'd like to. What I'm going to do is come into main here and go to page properties. And I'm actually going to remove the page title suffix because I don't want that landing page to have it. I'm going to just delete that. and click OK. I'll come into the sidebar now and go to those page properties if I'm patient here. Let's go ahead and add that suffix there and click OK. So effectively, I'll go ahead and save out what I've done because I kind of like that. Let's save this. Do you sense that I'm updating my website live in front of people? It could be true. Let's go ahead and save that. But if I now just come in and preview the Pacific Rowing Club page, let's go ahead and click on that and bring it up in the browser. What I should get is just that one tab has the full name. Kind of hard to tell when you're looking at the URL here, but now I get Pacific Rowing Club for my landing page, and I'll continue to have the PRC at the footer for the other pages. So I'm happy with that. That's the first one. Another thing you may have noticed is on that main page here, if you right mouse on the page and go back to page properties, if you're new to Muse, you may not have discovered this spot yet, but by default it's going to bring up the layout, and that's the attributes, the details that are site-wide attributes for the design. But to the right of it is a metadata tab, and when you click on that metadata tab, this is the place you can put odd little JavaScript snippets of content or just code, HTML code, that is important for different reasons. It's definitely one of the codey aspects of the no coding required Muse application, but this is a place that you can put a snippet of code that search engines are going to look for when you want to analyze. So notice this is a Google Analytics snippet here that will allow me to let Google know that I own this site and that I'm allowed to monitor its analytics. So when we get out to Webmaster Tools and Google Analytics, I will cover that over a little bit, but you'll notice that that is where that's been placed on that particular page. So I've just copied it from Google Analytics and pasted it here. Next thing that I did from a search engine standpoint, after you look at your page titles and such, and if we look at the individual page titles, let's come on in on this. If I go into page properties on an individual page and go to layout here, let me just see, under options actually, I'm using the same page name, page title here. Some of the folks on chat are welcome to talk about when you vary the file name, page title, and page name. It tends to confuse my mind. I believe that page name comes up in the site plan here. Page title is what appears in the browser. File name is what the URL displays. From an SEO standpoint, I don't know of a reason why you would vary the three of these, but I'm giving people permission today to contradict me in chat, and I will read it later, because as I mentioned, this is a jam session. We learn from each other. Another thing you may have noticed is as I was flipping through tabs, there's a metadata tab. So we've got that layout tab, and then second in the list is metadata. This starts to bring itself into setting keywords and descriptions. So how does this come into play? It comes into play, from what I understand, in two ways. If I go to the Google and I type in Rowing Club San Francisco, and I look at what comes up for hits, I see Pacific Rowing Club. Now, here's the fun part of life, the interesting part of life, is that depending on your machine, when you search, you're going to see some terrific results for your site. It's kind of cheating because you need to go to either something that has no cookies or history at all in your browser to do a search, or go to a brand new machine that has nothing to do with you. Google starts to give you the results that it thinks you want. So even if you come ranking at the top, it may not necessarily be true for others that are viewing your site that haven't been there before. I'm going to try a different search. If I just search for Pacific Rowing and see what I get for hits, something interesting comes up here. So you'll notice I've got Pacific Rowing Club, I've got the URL for my site, and then there's a description here. This is where, in a very brief sentence, not too long, and I'm sure you can read about the character count limitation, you're going to want to describe what the purpose of your website is as succinctly as possible. So it's a rowing club for young people, right? That comes up nice and clearly. Another thing you'll notice that's awfully nice is for folks that do search, because my site is very well structured, because my pages in my code have tags, H1, H2 tags, Google knows how to prioritize the content. So it knows its location. It found it on Google Maps. I don't know for sure how it does this, but I've got directions and such on my site. So I don't know if it's relying on just the name and doing a Google map search, or if it's pulling it off my site to validate it. But it's gone in and brought up individual pages in the site, which is really terrific. That's a nice thing, because if someone wants to jump right to the news page, they can. And notice there's even a little snippet of the content on that page that is being lifted as we search. So let's go back into the app and talk about descriptions and keywords first. So the description is going to be that one little sentence, two little sentences that I want to be communicated for the site. Keywords, and I'm kind of surprised this one's empty. Let me go back here for a second. Let's go to Pacific Rowing Club under Page Properties and look at the metadata. So the keywords are interesting. Some people say they don't matter. Some people say they do. Again, happy to put it up to a survey if you think it does matter. But the idea is that you're going to want to make sure that the common terms that people use when they're searching for your site, the keywords, that you'll come up as a result for those keywords. So you'll look at a range of what might be there. If you're Katie's Cafe and you want to compete with Starbucks across the street, some people will put the name Starbucks into the keywords. I think if you search for Starbucks, it's not necessarily going to bring up Katie's just because you've got it in those keywords, but I've been told that it does help. So I've gone in and defined a series of keywords. You'll notice I also have Google Site Verification here, and this is a different bit. I believe, as memory serves, that I want Google to be able to search for the sitemap on the site every night, or however often it does a search, it does a crawl for pages and content. Now, just to explain, Google wants to know that you have a site. They want to know that you have a site that's changing, that the content remains fresh. So the way that it determines if that's happened is it looks at your site map, and your site map just describes what pages are on the site and what content, what navigation and such might be on that content. So let's jump out again for a second. Let me go ahead and show you a sitemap. I'm going to take this as it comes. In order to kind of let you see that sitemap, I'm going to pull down on File, and I'm going to basically export as HTML to a folder this site. So we'll go ahead and define a location to export to. We'll put it on the desktop, and we'll give it a nice name like trash. Or not. Let's just stick with Untitled Folder 2 for now. That'll do. I'm going to choose it, and I'm going to go ahead and export my site content there. Let's swing that out to the desktop, to our oh so lovely Untitled 2 folder. Take a look at what's being put there, what's being exported by the application. I'll give it a second. Okay. So you'll see there's the site structure that's here. But interestingly enough, at the root, so what you have to imagine, if you're using a hosting platform like GoDaddy and you FTP the content up to GoDaddy, at the root level of the site, I think that's pretty important, different search engines like Google, perhaps Bing, I'm not sure, does look for a certain file called sitemap.xml. Muse will generate this for you automatically. We generate it every time you FTP up to your site. So Muse keeps a manifest of changes. It looks at what's local and what's remote on your hosting platform, and it will update the sitemap for you. If you host on Adobe Business Catalyst, Business Catalyst automatically, as a CMS, creates a new sitemap for your site every 24 hours and makes that available at the root of your site so that search engines will find it. Now notice what's being flagged here. It's code. Don't be frightened. I'm frightened. But it's simply just talking about the URL of the site, and it's describing the site content. So in here are details about individual pages and content on the site that it's relying on. So number one, don't worry about it. We generate it for you. We generate it every time you make a change. But what you do want to do is when we get into those tools, you're going to want to let Google know that you have a sitemap and you have the rights to share that sitemap. So similar to Google Analytics, when I went in and set up the analytics, I got that analytic code for my master page. It's saying that the sitemap, you should have it on the first page of your site, in the header, the snippet of code that they give you. So if we come back to page properties again, this guy right here is so that Google knows it has permission to crawl the site and look for a sitemap. And it's been validated. I can check in the Google tools that it knows that it's there. Okay, so we're making progress, people. This is not the most fun session ever. So number one, we've talked about page names. Number two, we got through descriptions and keywords. Now when we talk about keywords and descriptions to some extent, this kind of slightly boggles my mind, but you're supposed to put a unique description on each page of your site and also vary the keywords, I think. If I go to programs now and go to page properties, on the metadata area, I've gone in and tried to do a description that talks about programs. So programs is different than what is the rowing club. I've given a unique description. I didn't do keywords on every single page because I think I read something that said it's not necessary, that you put it on the first page and then give it up. How do you like that? Notice that it's inheriting from applied master pages anything that's in the header. So for my sitemap, for example, or my analytic code, it's going to inherit that from these other masters. All right, moving on. Next thing I want to show you is how you can tag content within a page so that it has a hierarchical structure for those search engines. So I've got my page here. I've got a site going on. And the landing page is kind of what's the most new relevant information here. And I've got a structure to my site design. If we come on in and look at the little rowathon here, I've got a table. I know everybody loves to angst about tables. So my table is actually embed code. This is using a table widget from Muse Themes. But if you look at the text that I have here, if I bring up my paragraph styles, it's gotten a little long in the tooth, the way things tend to get when you're in a rush and can't clean up your messes. But I have a number of paragraph styles that are defined. We are working on a new version of Muse that will come out in a couple weeks, and I'm really excited about that new version because it allows you to come in and easily clean up lots of aspects of your site, like paragraph styles. But actually, I should stop talking because until we announce our new release, we can't talk about it. The annual PRC Rowathon, that is my headline here on that page. When I click on it, you'll know that I've named it H2 Section Head. It's got a dot, which is dorky. I just did it so that it would come up to the top in its sort order here. It really has no relevance from an SEO or P tag or body tag or anything like that. It just made it sort at the top. So to be clear about that. If we look at what this is, it of course has text attributes, the font and such. But if I bring up this particular style name, you'll notice it's got the name that I've given it. I was able to come in and define a P tag or a paragraph tag for that style. So whenever I use that heading on a page, it's considered to be, for that page, the most important element on the page. I probably could make it an H1, but I've got it as an H2, and I don't necessarily have H1s, I don't think, anywhere else on the site, although perhaps my landing page I could check, but I may have one at the very top that's an H1. Nonetheless, they're defined as an H2 subhead. Now, I did that as a paragraph style. If I'm feeling kind of lazy or I want to create an exception, I can always come into some random text, and in the text panel, I can assign a P tag to any bit of text just by selecting it and defining it here. So it's not required that I define a paragraph style, but I have to be honest, if you're methodical about your structure, styles, I think, are very important because as you're working as a designer, if I change my mind, I can come in and decide that, for example, my H3s, which is what I think this is, actually, no, it's not. It's just my body text. Perhaps it needs to be a different font. I can change that and inherit that through. So I do have body text here. I guess I didn't bother putting an H3 on this, but I could. And again, I'm open if experts know how deep do you need to go as you're nesting, H1, H2, H3. I haven't gotten clarity on that. I know that your headlines definitely need to have an H1 or an H2 in order for something like Google to know that that's the topic of that particular page. Now for my body text, I do have just body text defined, and you notice that it's tagged with a P tag. That's a paragraph tag. So that's good for my text, but let's talk about images. When you place content on your page, all of the words obviously can usually be lifted. They can be searched for. Let's go to a page that has a little bit more text here for a moment. Actually, I'm going to want to go back because I want to get to my images. Let's go back. Okay. So text, obviously people can interpret that. If I am visually impaired and I'm using your website and there's something important about a graphic, let's say, it's important that you describe what that is, not only as an image, but as text as well. Now, interestingly enough, I've got an image here, but I was lazy and I've drawn it in Muse. Not many people know that the best way to draw a circle in Muse is to just draw a square and put a stroke on it and round the corners a lot. So this is actually a graphic element, believe it or not, that's built within Muse. But let's say I came in and brought an image, and I'm going to just make life really simple. Maybe. Doesn't matter much. Let's go see. I'll pick on PRC. I've probably got some images I can play with. Got this great little duffel bag. So let's say I want to add a duffel bag. I'm going to press and drag to place it on the canvas. If I'm visually impaired, I don't know what I'm looking at here. So what you want to do with images is when you place them, right mouse on that image and come into Edit Image Properties. What you'll have is the ability to define a tooltip, which is what a seeing person would see if they roll over the image, that will describe it. So if I'm assuming that someone that can see doesn't know what that is, I might say, check out the new PRC duffel bag. The alt text or the alt tag is very important. That is where you want to describe Pacific Rowing Club duffel bag. That alt text, if we just copy this element and go to a brand new page and paste it on that page and preview the page, this is because I'm not a code head and I don't want to get lost too easily. If I view page source, what you'll notice is that I have my image there, but now I have an alt tag or alternate text that explains what it is. So if a screen reader rolls over that, they're going to read it out loud to that visually impaired person, and if a search engine is searching the site, if it's relevant, it's going to know that that's the Pacific Rowing Club duffel bag. Now that's great for the image that we just created here. Let's make that go away. That's great for the image that we have placed just here, but what about background images? I didn't know this, and this was a trick I learned from Steve Harris of Muse Themes at Max, because this is a jam session and we learn from each other. If you have background images, so let's say I come on in and I have a container and I want to use scale to fill, let's say for my object, and I fill that container with the duffel bag, but it's important that it has a scale to fill applied to it. Or I have a scroll effects. Let's try scale to fit. I have a scroll effects applied to it. The problem, let's just look at this for a second, is when I come in to define image properties, it's not there. So I just thought you couldn't define alt tags on background images, but I was wrong. I admit it, I was wrong. What I've found out is that you can select that container, and oddly enough, in the hyperlinks dropdown, you have the ability to define a tooltip. And what I've been told is that, all right, we have to test this because I don't want to tell lies. I'm going to come on in, and under hyperlinks, we're going to have PRC, duffel bag, just like we did as an alt tag. I'm going to apply that to that guy. Let's go do that new page again real quick and see if this actually behaves the way I expect it to. Yes, I am experimenting in front of all of you, I admit it. Previewing, browser. There's my duffel bag. View page source. Let's go to the page. 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 Let Look at that, PRC Duffel Bag. So although I did it as a tooltip and not an alt tag, it works. So I would encourage you for all of the images on your site to get into the practice of tagging them. It cannot hurt. It's a good best practice, and it may affect your search rank. I think I'm being differed in there about tooltips, but it came up as an alt tag. So why is it that our tooltips are alt tags if it doesn't count? I don't know. Like I said, I'll read the chat later. Okay, let's close out this new page. Let's go back to our list and see how we're doing. So we've talked about setting paragraph styles. Let's go ahead and check some of these off. So external links, yep, I do that as much as I can. Internal links, I link to one another. So ways that you can tend to do that without being too obnoxious is if the header and the footer of your site have navigation. I don't. I've just got some contact information here, but I could repeat my header down here. In fact, I can do a very large header, and down below or alongside, I can have lots and lots of navigation. So you'll notice in the live site, not everything's on the parent nav. I've got some child navigation that's here that goes deeper. I could make sure that every single one of these elements is in the page by placing it in the footer area across the board. So that is one approach I've heard for that, if you're a believer. Talked about p tags. We talked about file names and page titles. Then there's things that are just traffic, of course. Having Facebook likes helps a lot. Number of users that click, of course, helps a lot. Notice here, page properties, metadata, descriptions that match the actual page content and is unique from page to page across the site. So not just copying and pasting across all of them for the description. Same thing for keywords. It sounds like there is value to add a keyword on a per page basis. Registering the site URL with Google and Bing. Let's go ahead and jump now out of Muse and talk about that. So I've got some of the good hooks in place now, and what I want to do is start to analyze the work that I've done. So to do that, you will want to go in and set up an account with both, for me, I'm not as familiar with Bing, but I've got one both with Google Analytics and Webmaster Tools. So in the Webmaster Tools, I've got the Pacific Rowing Club set here. If I come in to manage the site, let's just see if I click on in. You'll see that there's bits of information here. So once I come in and add the site, if you just do search for help with Google Webmaster Tools, you can stumble through this the way I did. But once you go in and point to the URL, it does ask you to prove that you own the site by generating or pointing to that sitemap. So you notice that it's tracking my sitemap. What I had done is gone in and it generated code in this interface for me, and it says please put this on the first page of your site. It then goes in, notice this add or test a sitemap. So I could come in and give it a URL. I can test that it's finding that sitemap by doing so. So this is the spot where I grabbed the code, placed it in, and then validated it to make sure that Google the Webmaster Tools were happy with that. So it tracks that, and it's basically got that connection here. Switching over to the other world, Google Analytics, I've got Pacific Rowing Club here. Now this may have been something that I added just today. So there's not going to be much data at all. I realized I hadn't really been tracking it, so I just set this up. So what I'm going to do is jump to another, let's just go to another site that I maintain because I've got a lot more traffic here. So let's go to the widget directory and take a look there because I think it's really interesting and it's pretty easy to understand the context because you all use Muse widgets, I'm sure of it. So what I'm able to see, we launched the widget directory just 1st of January. So it's really been up, actually December 22, I'm lying, right before the holiday break. We announced it the 5th of January. So I'm able to see my trends, how things are progressing. I can see traffic to the site. I see that it's kind of growing a little bit. Looks like we're, moving in the right direction here. I can come in and find some really nice bits of details too as well. So remember how we had keyword searches and the ability to define keywords in the metadata area. That's really nice when you start to look at, let's just see if I can find this, at the search words that folks are using. Let's see, you can see how smooth I am with this. Come back to my dashboard for a second. So I can see active users. This is kind of creepy. I can see how many people are currently logged in to the directory and what they're doing. But let me just look under acquisition. Let's try this. I see referral, direct, and organic search. So this is a breakdown of how many people knew the exact URL, musewidgets.com, as compared to how many were basically clicking. I believe a referral is there was a link on a site. Direct might have been that they typed it in directly. And then organic search is interesting because that allows me to see the terms that people are searching for. So I can see maybe the 100 most popular terms that they're searching for. And I can sort by that and see which phrases are hitting the most. So people were, how many people were searching for Adobe Muse widget full height. And this is as you have time to see what people did search for it and had success, you might consider adding some of these keywords directly in the site just to improve the results as you're working. Okay. What I want to do now is stop a little bit and talk about what you guys want to talk about. So that is pretty much the rundown. As I mentioned, the article, the beginning guide to SEO, it talks about a lot of other attributes or the other aspects of what you're doing. But let's see what's going on in chat and if there's topics that we can cover a little bit more. So Laurel D, Ollie, Chris, anything that's come up. I'm going to read through the questions that are here, but throw it in chat if you want to do a copy paste or just give me a sense of things that people wanted to see. If you do SEO in Muse, do you need to do SEO with Google also? So when you say doing SEO in Muse, if you're hosting on Adobe Business Catalyst, I think there's some value to showing that for a moment. So I host the microsite muse.adobe.com on Business Catalyst. And if you are a subscriber of the Creative Cloud, we have included the ability to host up to 5 sites on Adobe Business Catalyst. If I go to muse.adobe.com/admin, it allows me to log into the dashboard for the hosting platform, Business Catalyst. I'll come on in and log into the site, and I get a different set of analytics here. And to a certain extent, they're very interesting. They're easy to work with. This is where I can look over time and see how's traffic been on the site. Obviously, it's pretty cyclical. We went into the holiday period, which is a flat time. We tend to get about 10,000 hits, according to this display, to the microsite on a daily basis. But I can see some bit of information. You can also view more reports. If you have been hosting on Business Catalyst and you've not ever looked at this, the nice thing is that this reporting automatically happens in the background. If you're like me, the Rowing Club website, I just decided to do analytics this morning, although that site's been live for over a year, so I don't have the advantage of that historical data the way I would with Business Catalyst here. But there are some nice reports, and you can dig in a little bit here and see some more extensive reports as well. Now that also is depending on the plan that you have. If you have the basic straight up plan, the trial mode that you've upgraded in Business Catalyst, your reports will be more simple than the ones that you just saw from me because I've upgraded that site, to be fair. Okay. But as far as the question goes, what you want to do is, the way you want to look at it is you're putting hooks within your app, you're putting hooks within your website using Muse. Those hooks will then be used by search engine tools like Webmaster Tools and Web Analytic Tools. Some of the links that Chris Kellett put in this session earlier on are probably going to rely on the fact that you put those hooks in place in the Muse application. So yes, you're always going to want to have both. If, to be honest, you just put the hooks in Muse and publish the site up, you don't have to monitor the analytics. But if you do want to show your client how different approaches that you're taking, different campaigns, different ways of organizing the site gets you more or less in sales, if that's the purpose of your site, or traffic to your site, conversions and such, it's really good to keep those analytics around so that you have them month over month to do that analysis. But it's not required. Okay. Never used an SEO widget. What is the basic principle? I don't know. I don't know what SEO widgets there are that are out there. So if there are SEO widgets, you widget people, you're welcome to tell me about it. But I don't think that's ringing a bell. I'm going to look real quick. So the way I would look, which I encourage you all to do, not because I'm trying to drive traffic to my site, to be really clear, because it's a useful tool. If I put SEO in the search field for our Muse widgets, it's a good way to find out what's out there. So the intention behind the directory is to make it much easier for search engines to find the stuff that you people are making. So we do not sell anything on this site. You can come in and find free content. You can also find content that is for sale, but any content that you see here, you can preview it. Getting this widget takes you to the store of that vendor, and they get 100% of the proceeds. We're not making any money on this site, but it is a terrific way to see what's out there in one single location. So if you're developing widgets, if you've got them set up and available for users, please be sure to click on the Submit Widget link here and upload the details so we can add you into the directory. Okay, what else do we have? Chris Kellett says, Dani, this one. Oh, okay. See how handy it is? Funny, you should mention that because Chris Kellett created it. So the Social Meta Manager widget, Mr. Kellett, to the extent that you can type quickly, what is the purpose of the widget? It's great for organizing data for Google+. Okay. Yeah, we all love 123 Muse stuff. Chris is just launching it, and that love is a good thing to help get him started. Okay, let me look. Need SEO tips? Okay, good. Hopefully you're getting them. How can you present an evil search engine mail address? How can you prevent evil search engines mail addresses are picked up from your site causing spam? It's a good question. Part of what I don't know for sure, and again, I'm in a good mood. I'm open to learning anything I can. If I come here and I say, please email me, and for the me, I put my name, Dani at Adobe. My assumption is that a search engine can still grab that, even though it's not on the page. Let's do our little silly code test. So if I come in and paste it here and look at the code, view page source, and search for Dani, sure enough, I'm right there in the mail too. So that is not obfuscate, that does not protect my email address in any way. Any guidance from the community around trying to cloak your email addresses or phone numbers from the evil people would be welcomed. I know there are some sad tricks that just confuse your grandmother and your aunt, where you say, please come email me, Dani at adobe.com. Right? People will spell it out so that the evil spam people don't understand that that's your email address. Something tells me they're catching on to that trick, and my grandmother doesn't know what to do with that when it's time to get an email. Dani, try safe email. So safe email, I'm going to guess there's an obfuscation. So safe email gives you an email address that you put into your website that when something gets sent there, they make sure it's not going to get attacked. But I'm just reading here. There was a widget release recently improving Recaptcha for protection. So from a spam standpoint as well, if you create a form within Muse, let's just call this out. So if I go to the widget library and I go to forms, and I do just a simple contact form, we have had CAPTCHA on the Business Catalyst hosting, but it was very back-end specific. We recently, so you'll notice BC CAPTCHA, but that's only if you're working on a Business Catalyst hosted site. We added Recaptcha, and Recaptcha is a spam protection step. It asks you to verify that you're human when you submit the form, and that helps a good deal. But it sounds like folks are talking about something even better that's a widget that's available for that. Okay. Dutchy remove.nl. Yeah, I know. They're all nasty though, aren't they? So when you use metadata, can you copy the same ones to mobile and iPad devices, or do you have to do it all manually? The answer is that you have to do it all manually. If I build out, let's do, yeah, if I duplicate a page in Muse for alternate layouts, let's say I want to take my desktop design and do a tablet layout, it will carry over the page structure. Let me just show this just for the heck of it. It's not going to be a good answer though, but I just want to explain the answer I'm answering. So if I come in here, I just decide that the rowing club site is phenomenal and I really would like to do a unique tablet layout. I can come in and say create an alternate layout for me for tablet devices. And I can say go ahead and lose my cursor here. Go ahead and copy over the desktop site plan, page attributes, click OK. It's not going to bring any of the page content, but it brought over the page attributes, which is swell. If I come in and look at page properties, wow, see? Isn't that great? How could I have ever doubted the Muse engineering team? So the beautiful thing that just happened is when I copied over the site plan from my desktop instance to my tablet, the description, the keywords, and the HTML in the head were attributes that carried over. Now, yes. It's a jam session. I'm learning so much from you people. Okay, moving right along. That's all I have in the question area. What other questions that folks have for anybody that's here today? Why is the submit button exported as an image? I don't know. Let's look at that, Jason, because I'm available to look at this. Let's go on in. I'm going to create a new document again. Keep it disgustingly simple. Not that I'm wanting to prove this. Simple contact form, press and drag. Got a couple fields. Let's make it terribly simple. I don't even have a message field. Doesn't really matter. But I've got name, email, and a submit button. Preview in browser. There we go. Got it all. View page source. What has been suggested is that that is coming up as an image. I don't know. It's a good question. Send me, give me your email address in chat. I promise no one will spam you. And I'm happy to find out why we're generating an image there. Maybe because we can't talk about the next version, Chris Kellett. There's nothing stylish about it. It's not the styling, because there's the only thing that CSS will flatten right now is bevel and glow, perhaps. I don't have a bevel, I don't have a glow, I don't even have a shadow, I just have a stroke on this button, so it doesn't make sense to me. When I say I think, I mean I hope. I know. I have the advantage of being able to talk. You guys have to type all this stuff. What else can we do? I'm going to go ahead and swing over to the closing, because we do want feedback. Again, jam sessions are all different. SEO is an amorphous subject. I want to know if we covered what you expected we would cover today. If we didn't, you have to tell me what we didn't cover in the chat, other than the magic of it just happening on its own. So let us know. We are up again for more jam sessions. If there's topics that we haven't covered in a while that you'd like to hear about, let me know. Lower right-hand corner is a great place for that. If you're not part of it, the private Muse beta is an exciting place to be. If you go to museprerelease.com, sign up with your Adobe ID and agree to keep secret. Come join us there. It's a nice space for lean forward discussions about future features that you'd like to see. We don't tend to talk about what we're doing in the future until we're ready to begin to engineer it with you, but we do listen a lot. All right, Patrick, absolutely. Hope you learned a little bit. If not, thank you for just being here and sharing what you knew with the rest of the community. So I'm trying to follow this for a second. Diego, if you create mobile and tab it, can you update the metadata afterwards from the desktop? So is it synchronized? It is not. So if I understand the question, I'm going to go into my desktop design. I'm going to set up all my pages, do my keywords and my metadata. I'm going to create a layout for phone. It will all carry over. Create one for tablet. It will all carry over. One day I come in and say, wow, I'm not getting the right keywords. I'm going to change them. I have to change the keywords, and then I'm going to make that change across all three layouts. So they're not tied together and linked because you may want different terms for the different layouts. So you do need to copy and paste those across all three if you want them to be consistent. So the Muse beta space, let me just put this in, is museprerelease.com. We'll take you there. So museprerelease.com, put that in the browser. It will, again, have you sign up for a non-disclosure agreement. You can run the beta alongside the shipping version. That doesn't mean you can swap files back and forth, but you can definitely experiment, take something you're working on, the shipping version, experiment it with it in the beta, throw it away. Don't save it or do a save as, but you don't have to uninstall the shipping version just to be part of the beta. They both can be running on your machine at the same time. All right, people, thank you for yet another hour spent with the Muse team. We appreciate learning from you and your enthusiasm for the product. If you have fantastic designs, send them to Site of the Day. If you've got widgets that you want, please put them. There's a request form at the bottom of that widget directory. Click it, type in what you can't find, and I'm happy to ping the folks that I know that are developing them and see if we can make it, or if it exists, I'm happy to make sure that you find an easier time finding it, and we make the search better so that you would find it up front. Thanks, folks. I'm going to go get the recording link, and I'll be right back.